Easy guys, in my search for new ways to challenge my creative skills, I asked myself, what's the smallest creature possible in Spore? Like, the absolute tiniest the game will let me build. You don't need to wait to the end of the video for the answer, it's this. But here's the kicker, adding anything, eyes, legs, upgrades, immediately makes it bigger, invalidating the challenge to build the smallest creature. Much like the pitiful worm, it would be all about surviving with no upgrades. But what I really wanted was to practice my skills building as small as Spore would let me. So the next question was, how many upgrades would I allow myself to add? Legs? Eyes? Which would I choose? To make it fair, I decided all of them. Every category, one creature. How small could a creature be with every perceivable upgrade? As usual, there was only one way to find out. The tide pool, where all ideas in Spore are born. Our carnivore begins its journey, consuming as much meat as possible, not to grow, but as part of its new keto diet plan. Its objective, in fact, was to stay as small as possible. This was, in fact, as small as we could be in the cell stage. There was no way to make our skeleton shorter. We were already as small could be in the eyes of Spore. Our creature, the Minimondi, a play on words between the Latin word mini for small and mondi, trouble or problem in Japanese. With a spike on its butt to protect from attackers, we were slow, and so we evolved jets for extra speed. But we lacked precision. Instead, jets became cilia for faster turning. Slowly our butt spike evolved to create static. However, it soon discharged, leaving us vulnerable to further attacks and danger whenever passing wind. One of these drawbacks could be mitigated slightly by adding more electric nodes, decreasing the charge time between strikes. It wasn't long before evolution took its course and we evolved to the creature stage. The spine was shortened to the obligatory 2 vertebrae. We kept our eyes on the end of stalks to see over tall objects. At this stage of Spore, everything was tiny, like a chaotic circus of brawling midgets, in a time before anyone worried about ethics or political correctness. Next came the Opics, small blue creatures frozen mid-splits, the gymnasts who never got the memo to stop. We were all bizarre freaks of nature in our own ways. Naturally, we all started singing and became friends. The Minimondi had many eyes. Like a man with a lazy eye, you weren't sure which one to look into when saying hello. But that didn't stop us to continue making friends. Of course, this didn't always go to plan. Sometimes their short stance and many eyes made them feel easily slighted. Minimondi took offense, causing occasional fights to break out between individuals, as well as the rest of their species. Surely they were all to blame for this insult. Spore was extremely unforgiving to aggression as a predator. It took many good deeds to be considered peaceful or even neutral. As we evolved, I took every opportunity to use every spare inch for new limbs and decorations, staying as compact as possible. Around this time, a new baby was born in the nest. So ugly, everyone ran away, unaware they all looked exactly the same. You could try and explain this to them, but the answer would go over their heads. They were innately fascinated with collecting things. Being closer to the ground made them more in tune with the world around them. Things that others had dropped were treasures to the Minimondi. We continued to collect things for the nest. They made friends fast as other creatures looked at their nest in envy. Our evolutionary prerogative was compactness and speed, faster feet, the smallest arms possible, and extra eyes. Some creatures were aggressive, leading to confrontation. However, even simply defending yourself or eating meat in the creature stage branded you as a predator, railroading you into a destructive path later on. The Minimondi had little interest in fighting. They weren't fond of dying, especially since, by their own reckoning, they were farther from heaven than most creatures. They preferred simpler joys, admiring the well-formed butt cheeks of strangers and pursuing peaceful paths over violent ones. Unfortunately, even when you're just trying to have a good time, there's always someone who shows up ready to ruin it by trying to kill someone. But after so many Predator runs recently, it's actually quite nice to enjoy a more peaceful playthrough. I tried many variations. As limbs got shorter, everything blurred together into a plethora of stumps. I kept tweaking our design, ditching the wide stance in favor of something more compact and space efficient. Electing to use every available part type left us feeling drastically over-accessorized. a Swiss Army knife of various tools, eyes and implements. We continued to hunt for collectible items and had built quite the collection. Sticks could be traded with other species as a gesture of peace, or launched at your own kind to discourage overly enthusiastic romantic gestures. The Mino had amassed the largest stick collection on the continent. They weren't just survivors, they were connoisseurs. Eventually, the question arose, what do we do with all these sticks? The answer, naturally, was to start building crude houses. And just like that, the tribal stage began. We started fishing, now part of daily life. The Minimondi had more free time, less chasing, more chilling. One day they captured a rhubarb, a creature they unexpectedly grew fond of. They played didgeridoos to them. Strangely enough, it worked. The rhubarbs became an ally. We wore strange top hats, but not masks, as their real faces were fancier than any clothes they could make. Their small, stumped tails long enough to secure a backpack that could be filled with sticks and fish. Life was peaceful until the Magenta tribe attacked, jealous of the alliance between Rhubarb and Minimondi, during which our Rhubarb mysteriously ran away. To appease the Magenta tribe, a basket of fruit was offered. Then came the real strategy, a musical performance, complete with mid-roll ads the Minimondi had slyly inserted. By the end, the Magenta tribe had unwillingly joined their collective and sat through 3 ads. Next came the Cyans, a surprisingly friendly village of xenomorphs, if such a thing could exist. Our chieftain approached, dancing nervously, visibly unsure if this was diplomacy or a last rite. But the Minimondi songs and strategically placed mid-roll ads did their work. Soon the Cyans were swaying along, and our leader now commanded an army of petal-dispensing xenomorphs. Next up were the Greens, who were easily bribed into cooperation. But soon after, the Lilacs launched an attack, apparently offended by the Minimondi's stubborn refusal to die. Their annoyance turned into outright hostility, and they made it their mission to wipe the species out entirely. Meanwhile, the Magenta tribe found themselves unwittingly enrolled in what may have been the world's first premium subscription service. 1 basket of fruit a month in exchange for something they still couldn't quite explain. In retaliation for the earlier slight against their subscription services, the Minimondi launched an attack. The Minimondis weren't exactly built for battle, short, more into gathering and socializing than fighting, but what they lacked in strength, they made up for in numbers. Losses were frequent, but replacements came just as fast. Fueled by the overwhelming stockpile of resources, the Minimondi were growing rapidly. With their new subscription model in place, the Minimondi became industrious, catapulting themselves into the civilization phase. Their architecture reflected their nature, buildings wide and flat, with no need for tall ceilings when your entire species is knee-high. If only every tribe could be sold a subscription, their rise would be unstoppable. Growth, after all, was just one reoccurring payment away. Our newly formed civilization specialized in trade. We had no combat vehicles, no weapons, not even a mildly threatening gesture. If we were going to win, it would have to be through sheer cunning and generous bribery. We started by seizing as many spice vents as possible, securing a strong economic head start. It was essential, because without any means of defense, we weren't just a soft target, we were the target. Next, we added homes, factories and entertainment centers to our cities, all following the same theme as before, short, flat buildings for creatures of tiny size. Out of nowhere, a new nation appeared on the horizon. We wasted no time in establishing a trade route, solidifying diplomatic ties and securing a modest income with every transaction. It was a start. To grow that income, we needed more vehicles, but to build more vehicles, we needed more cities. And with no military power to seize them by force, our only option was clear. We'd have to buy them. Expansion, for us, would be a matter of economics, not conquest. The next nation to receive our strongly encouraged trade deal was the Purple Nation. As profits rolled in, we expanded our cities, which in turn boosted the income from spice veins we'd secured. For those nations unwilling to trade, we simply threw money at the problem until it stopped being a problem. At this fragile stage, universal goodwill was essential, because without weapons we had no way to fight back. Charm and currency were our only defenses. As empires rose and fell in waves of destruction, the Minimondi kept their heads down. quietly growing stronger behind a wall of diplomacy and trade routes. After enough profitable exchanges, the opportunity finally came to purchase our first city from the Purples. We took it, no force required, and converted it into yet another engine of economic growth. Next, a sailing ship was constructed, a trade vessel adorned with more trinkets than Mr. T. The mighty Sea Swag set out across the oceans, forging trade routes with distant lands and looking fabulous while doing it. Bribes were sent to the Forest and Blue nations across the sea, and more trade routes were formed as nations fought all around us. For a time, all nations seemed reasonably content with us, but amid the constant infighting, the Forest Nation, locked in conflict with the Yellows, demanded we cut off trade with their enemy. Agreeing would damage our relationship with the Yellows, refusing would upset the Forest Nation. We chose to refuse and promptly smoothed things over with a generous bribe to the Forest, minimizing the fallout. Soon after, the Yellow Nation's city fell, not by force, but by coin, further expanding our growing economic empire. Next, the Blue Nation urged us to declare war on the Yellows. We politely declined, and then immediately doubled down on diplomacy, furiously constructing more trade ships to strengthen our ties and keep the peace, one cargo load at a time. It wasn't long before the Yellows grew so fond of us they sold us the last thing they owned, their final city. That left just the Blue and the Forest Nation, with the Blues still insisting we go to war with the Forest. We ignored them, of course, then bribed our way back into their good graces. With control of the central continent secured and every trade route humming with profit, the Minamondi Empire was thriving, swept up in an unstoppable tide of our booming economy. Meanwhile, the Greens and Blues, despite being locked in conflict, both adored us equally, their mutual affection for our trade deals outweighing their hatred for each other. With the purchase of the final Blue City, the end was all but certain. We initiated our global merger, systematically buying out every last remaining city. No war, no conquest, just cold, clean capitalism. Their next ship was built purely for trade and cargo, and true to Minamondi tradition, it was wildly over-accessorized. They called it the Gold Dwarf, a floating tribute to success. During the tutorial phase of the space stage, we were instructed to place a colony on Haki 3. Naturally, we ignored that and instead settled on a nearby Purple Spice planet. Purple Spice, the most valuable of all, offered a crucial financial edge, especially during the slow, grindy beginnings of interstellar expansion. The downside to Purple Spice planets was their location. Either scorching hot or freezing cold, they demanded multiple rounds of terraforming just to become habitable. And that came at a cost. A cost we definitely couldn't afford in this early space stage. Next, we encountered the Dinosaur Empire, first contact in space. With little money for bribes, we simply hoped they were friendly. Soon after, we met another Dinosaur Empire, this one with a lowercase d. Fortunately, they were like-minded traders who shared our passion for profit. We quickly established trade routes, seizing the opportunity to grow our influence the Minamondi way, through commerce, not conflict. Next, we met the aggressive Kinnels. Time would tell how we would handle these hostile species. For now, we could only keep an eye on them. We scoured the stars and got lucky, stumbling across a few white stars, which offered a higher chance of hosting Purple Spice planets. Sure enough, we managed to claim another one, adding a valuable gem to our growing collection. The first scraps of Purple Spice harvested from our planets were a godsend. Even a modest haul instantly tripled our wealth. Next, the Troggle Empire emerged. More scraps of Purple Spice were sold, another willing economy for us to exploit. Just in time too, keeping the Kinnels pacified was becoming increasingly expensive. The solution? An alliance. We forged one with both dinosaur nations, our first true friends amongst the stars. We initiated multiple trade routes with the dinosaurs, not because we had grand designs on their planets, but mostly to keep things friendly and avoid diplomatic incidents. Unfortunately, the Kinnels kept expanding, and things took a further turn when we stumbled upon the Ashonas, a military empire with a charming habit of sliding into war if not regularly bribed. Basically, galactic toddlers with plasma cannons. Then came the Xenomorph Empire, traders much like us, except their main export was sheer terror. Meanwhile, our purple spice was fetching excellent prices. Business was booming. We spotted a wormhole in the northeast, but our ship at this stage is about as sturdy as a paper cup, and whatever was waiting on the other side probably wasn't accepting trade deals. Instead, we focused on what we did best, finding another purple spice planet and quietly adding it to our growing collection. If one wasn't bad enough, we met another evil Kinnel empire to the west. We were surrounded by allies and enemies, and over the coming years we would slowly watch these empires rise and fall until balance was found. Next, we discovered the Gooplets, each one requiring a bribe just to stay civil. Meanwhile, the Ashonis were busy doing what they did best, stirring up wars near their borders, eager to expand and assert dominance over anything that moved. I gradually began terraforming a cluster of purple spice planets, and it wasn't cheap. Most were either scorching wastelands or frozen rocks requiring serious climate adjustment before they could support life. As each one became habitable, we accidentally began spreading xenomorphs to the surface of all our planets, much to the joy of the local fauna and flora. One by one, we brought each purple spice planet to T1 status, slowly but surely turning uninhabitable wastelands into mildly livable, profit-generating real estate. The trade routes were finally starting to pay off, but we still didn't have the funds to buy the planets outright. For now, they'd have to wait. The routes were mostly for keeping relations warm anyway. We weren't particularly interested in owning their planets, just their affection, and maybe their money. Our purple spice profits began to grow. The Kinnels to the west had become a constant drain on our bribe budget. Clearly, it was time for a proxy war. Like any respectable capitalist empire, we'd outsource the fighting to someone else, funding the conflict from a safe distance while they handled all the casualties. Naturally, we'd frame it as a noble effort to maintain stability and peace in the system. The dinosaurs were the perfect candidates, loyal, well-armed, and just gullible enough to think it was their idea. Next, we began upgrading our purple spice planets to Tier 2, boosting their output and watching our finances skyrocket. Before long, we were officially millionaires, wealthy, powerful, and still allergic to direct conflict. Naturally, we spread even more xenomorphs across the galaxy, because if you're going to terraform, you might as well add a little zest. Then, pirates hit one of our purple spice planets. Annoying, yes, but nothing a few laser turrets and a strongly worded financial statement couldn't handle. Our first planetary upgrades were increased spice storage, maximizing the yield of every harvest. City upgrades followed, further cranking up production. And of course, we bribed the Ashonis again. Then, in true Minimonde fashion, we set the dinosaurs to fight them, because some traditions are worth keeping. Our purple stockpiles were growing fast, and selling to the Troggle was turning every yield into serious profit. But we couldn't help but notice something tempting. The Kinnels also owned a purple spice planet, and we had our many envious eyes on it. We brought the Troggle into our alliance, and as a rite of passage, asked them to do what all good friends do, start a war on our behalf. Their mission was simple: take the Kinnel's purple spice planet so we could swoop in later and buy it with a generous trade deal. It wouldn't be quick. The Troggle were methodical, working their way through nearby Kinnel planets one at a time. But the Kinnels were demanding more money, and so I upped my proxy war by sending the Troggle and the dinosaurs to attack them, now including their lucrative purple spice planet. Meanwhile, back in the Kinnel system, the dinosaurs had done their job well, driving the Kinnels out and clearing the way for us to establish a trade route. All that remained was to gather enough funds to purchase the system and finally claim the coveted purple spice planet for ourselves. Just a few more trades. Fortunately, the xenomorphs were paying top dollar for purple spice, providing a much-needed cash injection to bring our plan across the finish line. Returning to the purple system, I activated my trader-exclusive cash infusion ability, instantly giving me the opportunity to purchase the planet on the spot. I paid more than it was worth, sure, but maintaining good relations was part of the strategy, and the planet would earn it all back soon enough. Without wasting a moment, I began terraforming my newly acquired prize. Even after welcoming xenomorphs into the Alliance, our system remained in chaos. Wars echoed across the stars, and we worked behind the scenes to neutralize our enemies wherever possible. Both factions of dinosaurs had locked horns with the Kinnels, waging war on opposite ends of the system. a perfect storm of conflict that fortunately didn't involve us directly. Our profits climbed steadily, reaching a comfortable 15 million, more than enough to keep the gears of diplomacy and capitalism spinning. The last Kinnel world was a stubborn T3 fortress, while the dinosaur world we were using to assault it was only a humble T1. The Kinnels wouldn't budge, clinging to that planet like a particularly stubborn stain. Meanwhile, the dinosaurs and Troggle had set their sights on the Ashonis to the south, opening up a second front against another of our long-standing annoyances. As the war with the Ashonis raged on, our profit margin allowed us to invest heavily in planetary defense. Every colony was fortified with patrol satellites and turrets in every city, an expensive but worthwhile insurance policy. When pirates inevitably tried their luck, our defenses made short work of them, handling the threat with minimal fuss and giving our empire an added layer of welcome autonomy. 52 million in the bank, not bad for a species that bribed its way out of fistfights. We helped the dinosaurs fend off an Ashonis attack, though by this point, the Ashonis were more of an annoyance than a threat. With our support, the dinosaurs claimed a new world and the Ashonis were reduced to a single, lonely T1 planet. We called in the Troggle. Conveniently positioned with a nearby T3 colony, the outcome was obvious. The Ashonis never stood a chance. Next, we had turned our attention to the Kinnels, the last holdouts. Their T3 homeworld had kept the dinosaurs at bay for far too long, but with our backing, it finally fell. At last, the system was ours. Only allies remained. Every troublesome species that might have interfered with the sacred flow of profit had been dealt with. We revisited the wormhole tucked into the corner of our system, the same one we'd discovered at the start of the space stage. To our amazement, it led directly to the center of the galaxy. Easily the luckiest wormhole jump I've ever had, straight from our backyard to the galactic core. Unfortunately, we emerged in the heart of Grok's territory, home to the most hostile, war-hungry species in existence. If we wanted to survive this far behind enemy lines, we needed a foothold. There was a planet near the wormhole, not a purple spice planet, sadly, but it would have to do. As humble traders, we weren't about to fight the Groks head-on. Instead, we turned to a new, non-lethal weapon, terraforming. Raising a Grok's planet above T0 would eliminate their presence entirely. So we got back to work, slowly warming the terrain while kiting angry Grok's defenders around the planet. Colonization wasn't the goal, just eviction. The Groks attacked unprovoked, and we were simply improving the neighborhood. We began the slow, deliberate eradication of the Groks, terraforming their worlds while dodging their relentless defenses. Speed was everything. We struck fast, raising our shields at the last second to fend off incoming fire, then erased any remaining defenders. Until now, we'd coasted to victory on bribes and trade deals, but that era had ended. This was a new kind of campaign, one where global warming wasn't a crisis, but a carefully calculated strategy, used to clear the path for long-term profit. One scorched Grok's planet at a time. One by one, we systematically terraformed Grok's controlled planets out of existence, replacing aggression with atmosphere. And as always, we kept our eye out for the real prize, any purple spice planets hidden in the chaos. Grok's planets fell one by one as we continued our campaign, dodging their ships and quietly erasing their presence from the map. Back home, however, chaos brewed. Not in our territory, but among our allies. A wave of eco-disasters had struck their planets, and they constantly begged for help dealing with invasive species. In the noble spirit of alliance and cooperation, we declined. This hurt our reputation, but they needed to learn to manage their own ecosystems. We weren't running a galactic babysitting service. After carving a trail of ecological adjustments through Grok space, we received a hostile transmission. But this time, it wasn't the Groks, it was the Ravenoids, the second most aggressive species in the galaxy, partnered with the deceptively harmless-looking genocidal herbivores. Together, they'd formed a militarized belt around the galactic core. If we wanted to pass through, it was going to take more than diplomacy, it was going to take a bribe. With a safe path to the galactic center secured, a small but stable network of planets began to form. Our alliance expanded, and other creatures started to thrive in the relative calm we've carved out in this once hostile region. Among them was the Chloroblast Empire, a curious new player with the look of something about to bloom. The center of the galaxy, once dominated by conflict, was starting to show promise. This wasn't just sanctuary, it was a fertile ground for profit. Opportunities were waiting to be harvested. Finally, we approached the galactic core, to which all creatures in Spore were drawn. All that was left was to take a quick trip to see Steve and claim the Staff of Life. The Minimundi, once small and strange, had grown into something vast. Through capitalism, cunning, and carefully orchestrated proxy wars, they had risen, not through conquest, but through strategy, to become a quiet, unassuming galactic superpower.